Despite hundreds of years of war, plague, and strife, the South Kingdom of Men has endured for over 3,000 years. But as the reign of its 26th steward approaches, so does the greatest challenge to its very survival, the War of the Ring. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we conclude the history of Gondor. As we discussed in last week's video, Aragorn, under the name Thorongil, had successfully led a campaign to attack and weaken the Corsairs of Umbar in 2980 of the Third Age. However, rather than return to Gondor, other duties called him, and he makes his way to the east. One who is not sorry to see this Thorongil disappear is Denethor II, who takes his role as 26th ruling steward just 4 years later in 2984. Denethor and his wife Finduilas, the sister of Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth, had 2 sons, Boromir and Faramir. Boromir is doted upon by his father and is interested in great deeds of battle. Faramir, meanwhile, displeased his father in both his actions and his friendship with Gandalf the Grey. While not as highly regarded by his people as Thorongil had been, Denethor proves to be a more than capable ruler. He is quiet, listens to counsel, and is wise in his rule. However, just 4 years after rising to the role of steward, his wife Finduilas becomes one of many to fall under the shadow of Mordor, and dies at just 38 years old. Overcome with grief, Denethor becomes even more grim and silent. Also weighing on the steward is the continuing resurgence of Sauron. Denethor anticipates that it will be during his time that Sauron will make his great war upon Middle-earth. Despite its dwindling power over long centuries, Gondor is unquestionably the strongest of all the remaining realms that oppose Sauron. This makes the conquest of Gondor Sauron's primary objective in the coming war. The weight of these events, combined with overconfidence in his own willpower, leads Denethor to gaze into the long-forbidden Minas Anor Palantir to seek knowledge. Indeed, Denethor would be successful in gaining the knowledge he sought, so much so that we are told his people wondered at him. However, Sauron, who would use his captured Ithil stone, discovers Denethor was also using one of the Palantiri. Sauron attempts to bring the Anor stone under his will, like he had done with Saruman and the Orthanc stone. However, he is unsuccessful. Denethor's strength of will, integrity, and right to use the stone wins out over even Sauron himself, though it comes at a cost. Denethor's already weakening body is given an even greater toll due to the stress of using the stone, and Sauron's apparent invincibility he sees in the Palantir. This causes the steward to age prematurely. Sauron would finally launch the first attack of the War of the Ring on June 20th, 3018. While in outward appearance this attack on Osgiliath was made to test Denethor's strength, it also had the secret task of allowing the Nazgul to pass into Gondor undetected. To Sauron's dismay, Gondor is stronger than he believed. Boromir and Faramir defended, then destroyed the ancient bridge of Osgiliath, denying Sauron's forces access to the western side of the river. The night before the attack, the brothers had a prophetic dream, speaking of a halfling, a blade that was broken, and the land of Imladris. Denethor recognizes Imladris to be Rivendell, and sends Boromir on the errand to find it, an errand from which he will never return. As Boromir heads north and joins the Fellowship of the Ring, Faramir is sent on March 1st to lead the Rangers of Ithilien. These lands that were so long a part of Gondor were now essentially held by the enemy. Operating out of places like Heneth Anun, the Rangers would raid the servants of Sauron like the Haradrim as often as they could. On the day Boromir is killed at Amon Hen, both Faramir and Denethor hear the horn of Gondor in the distance. 3 nights later, Faramir is sitting by the banks of the Anduin in Osgiliath, when he either sees or envisions a boat carrying his brother's body out to sea. 13 days after Boromir's death on March 9th, Gandalf and Pippin arrive in Minas Tirith. On their way, they had seen another great feature of Gondor, the warning beacons. The beacons had been in place since the late Second Age, and were used to warn the southern lands of danger in Calenarthon. With Calenarthon now Rohan, they are typically used to warn the people of Anorion of danger. That very day, the red arrow is delivered to King Theoden, a summons for aid from Denethor. And on March 10th, Sauron sends fumes from Mordor, blocking out the sun in much of Gondor and Rohan in what is known as the Dawnless Day. That very day, the Dark Lord sends his host from Minas Morgul, under the command of Gondor's old nemesis, the Witch King of Angmar. Also on March 10th, Faramir retreats across the Pelennor fields and is saved from the Nazgul by Gandalf the White. In preparation for an assault on Minas Tirith, most citizens of Gondor are sent to flee north and west. Those remaining behind are soldiers, healers, and boys who refuse to leave. In order to reinforce the capital, 3,000 men from the southern fiefs, including Belfalas and Dol Amroth, come to Minas Tirith. We are told these 3,000 soldiers are less than a tenth of what was needed. For while the Witch King marches closer to Minas Tirith, many in the south are preoccupied with fighting the Black Fleet of Umbar. Denethor sends Faramir to Osgiliath to intercept the Witch King's army on March 11th. The following morning, Sauron's host uses secret boats to cross the river and overwhelm the Gondorians, causing Faramir to retreat to the Causeway Forts on March 13th. Learning the Witch King was on the field of battle, Gandalf makes for the Ramas Ekor, where Faramir had retreated to. Thanks to a charge by his uncle Prince Imrahil, Faramir, wounded and suffering under the black breath of the Nazgul, is saved and brought back to Minas Tirith. As the Pelennor is overrun by Sauron's forces, Denethor is overcome with grief at his son's state. He loses his will to fight and gives no more thought to the defense of his city. Gandalf and Imrahil must take up command of Minas Tirith as the siege of Gondor begins. Throughout the day of March 14th, the hosts of Mordor dig pits and build siege weapons on the Pelennor. The Nazgul continue flying over the city, bringing despair to the soldiers awaiting the battle. The orcs launch stones into the city which burst into flame, followed by catapulting the severed heads of slain Gondorians over the city walls. And with the morale of the Gondorians at its lowest point, the Witch King begins his assault around midnight. The might of the Wall of Gondor and the steadfastness of many of their people held out for a time against the invaders. However, the Great Gate of Minas Tirith is broken by the battering ram, Grond. In rides the Lord of the Nazgul, and there is only one who stands in defiance of him, Gandalf the White upon Shadowfax. And unlike Eärnur's steed so long ago, Shadowfax would not flee the Witch King. Just as the Witch King draws his blade, which erupts with flames, horns begin to blow in the distance. Rohan had come. Thus, the morning of March 15th brings the climax of the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the largest and greatest of the War of the Ring. Theoden's Rohirrim strike a mighty blow to the forces of Mordor. He personally kills the chieftain of the Haradrim before being struck down by the Witch King himself. The Witch King in turn is killed by Merry and Éowyn. While this loss is hugely demoralizing for Sauron's army, Gothmog, lieutenant of Minas Morgul, assumes command, and the Southrons charge with their Mumakil. Éomer, having discovered his sister seemingly dead upon the battlefield, flies into a rage, fully prepared to die as Rohan's final leader. Another prepared to die as the final ruler of his people is Denethor, though under very different circumstances. Denethor prepares a funeral pyre for him and Faramir to burn. While Gandalf and Pippin would save Faramir, Denethor lights himself ablaze. One reason for Denethor's despair was a vision Éomer would see come to fruition. Denethor had seen a fleet of enemy ships with black sails arriving at the Ramas, prepared to enter the fight. Éomer beholds this development and believes the final stroke has come. and the Rohirrim and Gondorians will soon be destroyed. However, it was not their enemy in these ships. For Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, the sons of Elrond, and the Grey Company had walked the paths of the dead, and the dead men had driven the Haradrim and Corsairs from the Gondorian settlements and havens. Aragorn then commandeered the Black Ships, bringing many reinforcements from the southern fiefdoms who had flocked to the banner of the heir of Isildur. Rather than Éomer being caught against overwhelming odds, the host of Mordor is now caught between hammer and anvil, and the Battle of the Pelennor Fields is a victory for Gondor and Rohan, the Oath of Eorl once again fulfilled. After the victory, Aragorn furls his banner and makes camp outside the city. He appoints Imrahil the temporary lord of the city as per Gondorian law. Aragorn would later enter the city in secret, coming to the Houses of Healing, where he healed Merry, Éowyn, and Faramir, all of whom were suffering under the Black Breath. Greater than any genealogy was this fulfillment of a prophecy. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known. Word spread throughout the city, and Aragorn would work late into the night healing the citizens of Gondor. After taking counsel with Gandalf, Éomer, Imrahil, Elladan, and Elrohir, Aragorn resolves to lead a force in a distractionary attack upon Mordor, in hopes it would give Frodo a chance to destroy the One Ring. This force of 7,000 leaves Minas Tirith on March 18th. It is estimated that a defensive force of around 9,000 is left to protect the city, featuring Rohirrim, soldiers from the southern fiefdoms, and survivors of the city. The host of the west would meet an army of Sauron's orcs, trolls, Haradrim, and Easterlings, numbering over 60,000. The Great Eagles would of course also come to the battle and aid the men, and the One Ring is indeed destroyed, causing the destruction of Sauron, the Nazgul, Barad-dûr, the Black Gate, and most of Sauron's forces. With the great enemy permanently disembodied and never again a threat, Aragorn returns to Minas Tirith, where Faramir, now Steward of Gondor, leads the ceremony crowning Aragorn King of Gondor and Arnor. Aragorn reinstates the role of Steward of Gondor as it had once been before the line of kings failed, and makes Faramir both Steward of Gondor and Prince of Ithilien. In time, Ithilien would indeed become populated once more. One group who came to dwell there are some elves of Mirkwood, led by Legolas, and it is said Ithilien once again became the fairest country in all the Westlands. As for Aragorn, he would be taken up the slopes of Mount Mindolluin behind Minas Tirith by Gandalf, and there would find a sapling of the White Tree of Gondor, planting it in place of the long-dead tree, which is taken to the Houses of the Dead. After her arrival with her father, grandmother, and grandfather, Arwen marries Aragorn in Minas Tirith on Midsummer's Day 3019. Now king of the reunited kingdom of Gondor and Arnor, Aragorn sets to reordering his realm. He orders the restoration of Orthanc, and has the Palantir returned there. He declares the Druidan Forest a protected realm of his kingdom belonging to the Druidine. The Shire is likewise declared a free land under the protection of his kingdom, and he forbids men from entering it without the leave of the halflings. He also expands the Shire to include the lands as far west as Emin Bereid. Together, Aragorn and Éomer renew the oaths of Cirion and Eorl, and due to the effects of Sauron's influence, we are told Éomer would often fulfill the oath, for there were many enemies to defeat before the White Tree could grow in peace. Together, Aragorn and Éomer would ride to both the east and south of Middle-earth, fighting and defeating the last remnants of those loyal to Sauron. We are told specifically Aragorn makes peace with the Haradrim after his coronation, and that the threat of the Corsairs was finally subdued during his reign, and the haven of Umbar finally retaken. The reign of King Aragorn II Elessar would bring prosperity not seen in Gondor for centuries. He would rule for 122 years before his death on March 1st, 120 of the Fourth Age. At this time, his son Eldarion would take the throne, inheriting a reunited kingdom unburdened by the threat of Sauron, or great enemies influenced by his presence. He is left to lead Gondor further into the new Fourth Age of Middle-earth. While we don't know much canonically of Eldarion's reign, the waning of his rule serves as the backdrop for Tolkien's abandoned sequel. To learn about that story, check out my video on The New Shadow. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Listen Me the Cinda, Celebrimbor, The Mighty Mim, Team Weasel, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, Toby Mobs Music, CCDC Red Team, Nerd Sidgman Anytimer, Pelkey Sports Cards, Mookie the Brown, Christopher Carbaugh, Joe Tepper, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Michael Wu, Grant McGregor, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.